We are live. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for signing on. It's really great to see all these names filling in the room in support of Voices of Lefferts, issue 8. If you feel like saying hello and letting us know where you're tuning in from, please give us a shout. All right, hi everybody. We'll get started in just a minute. All right, yes. Contributor Laura Thorne drew these amazing images of storefronts in Flatbush. All right. Welcome, everyone. We are so thrilled to host tonight's reading for Voices of Lefferts, issue 8. I'm Jean from Greenlight Bookstore, and we're really excited to host tonight's launch event. We have a full lineup of local contributors joining us, and they'll be moderated by Voices of Lefferts editor and director Deborah Mutnick. So you're in for an excellent time. Before we start, I just want to say a huge thanks to Deborah and to all of tonight's featured contributors for making this happen, and to all of you for showing up. Just a few housekeeping reminders before we get started. In our Zoom webinar tonight, you can see and hear our speakers, but they can't see or hear you, although they can see your names and that you're here. So please feel free to engage by using the chat. That's a great way to show your appreciation for the authors and to show, to interact with your fellow attendees. If you have a question you'd like to have answered by any of tonight's authors, please post that question in the Q&A module. That's a different portion of the Zoom. You can find that by clicking on the icon that looks like 2 speech balloons. We'll be pulling questions from the Q&A to be answered at the end of the event. Also, we are recording tonight's event and it will be posted to our YouTube channel tomorrow. So please keep an eye out for that. And most importantly, tonight's featured title, Voices of Lefferts, issue 8, is available for sale from Greenlight Bookstore. You can shop in person at our stores from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day of the week. And you can also purchase a copy online or purchase it at our Flatbush Avenue location in person. I will drop the buy link in the chat so that you all have access to that throughout the event. If you care about supporting this great community project and your local independent bookstore, buying tonight's featured book is a great way to do that. To introduce our host tonight, Deborah Mutnick is a professor of English at LIU Brooklyn, co-editor of Reflections, the Journal of Civic Engagement, Public Rhetoric, and Service Learning. And she is a member of the advisory board of the Coalition for Community Writing. She also sits on the board of directors of the Prospect Lefferts Gardens Neighborhood Association and has lived in the neighborhood since 1996. Since the first issue came out, Greenlight has sold over 1,000 copies of the Voices of Lefferts collections. Greenlight is honored to be able to offer space for this tremendous community writing project, and we're grateful to all of you for supporting the project and our bookstore with your presence tonight. Deborah is going to speak a little bit more on the Voices of Lefferts project and introduce tonight's readers. Without further ado, please take it away, Deborah.
Thank you, Jean, and good evening, everybody. Welcome to the launch of issue number 8 of Voices of Lefferts, the Flatbush-PLG Community Writing Journal. In the late 1930s, the Federal Writers Project, a government-sponsored public humanities program under the aegis of the New Deal's Works Progress Administration, unparalleled since then in its scope and achievements, set out to tell the story of American cookery and the part it has played in the national life. Inspired in part by this never wholly published trove of food stories, recipes, and images, and in part by the ways in which the pandemic raised our consciousness about the necessity of food in a period of lockdown, fears of contagion, loss of health, life, jobs, and income, hunger, mutual aid, and community fridges, Voices of Lefferts embarked on a project called Flatbush Eats in the winter of 2021. What you will hear tonight are readings of essays from the second of 2 special issues of the journal on that theme. Because I want to keep this introduction short to give as much time as possible to the readers tonight, I'll refrain from saying more now, but invite questions during the Q&A about the FWP, Flatbush Eats, and the Voices of Lefferts Community History Project in general. Thanks go to our graphic designer, Frank Marchese, photographers Nancy Troiber and Neil Carpenter, and copy editors Sandra Skoblar and Rena Klieg. Thanks also to Humanities New York and Long Island University for their generous support, as well as PLG Arts, Park Slope Copy Center, and especially our host tonight, Greenlight Bookstore. One thing you'll notice if you pick up a copy of this issue is that the editorial, which I write, takes Thanksgiving as its starting point. That tells you how long it's been since the issue was. The fact is, it was ready to go to print a couple of months ago, but we didn't have the funds. Although we've been generously supported in the past by Humanities New York, the Brooklyn Arts Council, and the Citizens Committee of New York City, we struck out this year in our grant applications. For the first time, we started a GoFundMe campaign. That campaign has gone much better than I would have guessed. Big thank you to everyone who's donated so far. We've almost made 2/3 of our goal of $7,500, but we still have a ways to go. Although we're applying for more grants, we want to ensure the continuation of our programs for as long as there's interest in them in the neighborhood. In a moment, I'll drop the link to the campaign in the chat. If you haven't yet contributed, we would be ever so grateful for your support. And don't forget to buy a copy of this issue at Greenlight. Now I'll list tonight's authors in the order in which they'll appear, and then they will each briefly introduce themselves. The readings always spark questions and comments. Please write your questions in the Q&A, and we always look forward to the dialogue. The readers are Robert Gibbons, Caroline Holden, Jean Barron, Norma Williams, Jennifer Chen, Laura Thorne, Rena Klieg, and Andrea Phillips Merriman. Let me now pass the virtual mic to our first reader, Robert Gibbons.
Hi, everybody. Thank you to Deborah Mutnick, professor and community builder, to Voices of Lefferts, who I love and I've served and worked and wrote, and to Greenlight Bookstore, and also to Nancy Troiber. Thank you so much for being here. The title of my piece is called Dear Aloe, Notes on the Human Condition. It starts with an epigraph by Elias Canetti. Does this intimate mixing of all our utterances with the lips, teeth, tongue, throat, all those parts of the mouth that serve the business of eating, does this mixing tell us that language and eating forever belongs together, that we can be nobler or better than we are? Dear Aloe, on Wednesday, I went to the garden called La Finca de Sur, a place where you are greeted by sunflower, where urban women raise plots of cucumbers and radishes, a compost heap full of earthworms. There I am with the dark shoulders of trees, and this is when I'm most intimate to the personality of nature, be it annual, periodic, or impatient. If I could be as iridescent as the blue irises or wily as the wisteria until the humidity erases my humanity, this could be my remedy for a mutilated world, a world that uses food as politic. We choose to cheapen what we consume, be it styrofoam or plastic. If the money is not enough, then we must conform. So I sit here in this garden with dirty laundry. I sit here under fire beneath a gyre of trash and train and ambulance and noise and causeway because my mind is crowded without the proper nutrition. I am a diorama of negative, but I use the Atlantic River as sedative. Dear Aloe, I remember you. The wicked way you spiral through air like flame. I could name you calamine or liniment. One summer I lived in the tenement of my body, a boy enthralled with a motorcycle. I rifled through the countryside of the Bahamas. My mom has allowed me to go on vacation. I raided through the countryside with a motorcade of other boys, boys that bent curves, boys swirl the mountain. Dear Aloe, all of a sudden, I acrobat in air. My flimsy, threadbare body lay on earth. The tailpipe of the cycle made my ripped to the burn. My flesh lay prostrate as I wept. I am wilted. Someone torch my leg. I beg to be free. My flesh needs to mend of cool. I became a spool of insecurity. Dear Aloe, succulent. I'm green and tropical, a descriptor of my childhood, all the bushes behind grandma. She said I would grow like a peace lily. The hedges were enclosures. I asked to spend the night outside, to use my puberty as a pilot lock. Grow becomes a pictogram on the side of an Egyptian temple. All the pimples of the cacti, brown fry heat. Dear Aloe, I want to squat with the ones assembled above about the garden as metaphor, the invisibility of food or food is art, but I just couldn't or did not then. Otherness. I rather squat. But the black-eyed Susan says, wait, I'm here. I'm yellow. I came from seed, I came from sunshine, I came from rain, from this framework of dirt and ash and clay in May and June. I'm still as false as August, the dreary skyfold, sold for 1 million, but there are calla lilies and okra. They are choking on their vine, not some, but all. It's called me to be natural, rather too academic or credentialed, not to mention the holy throat of the superdoes. The roosts choose flight or eyesight. I take my bags. An organic home. Thank you. Thank you to Deborah, thank you to Greenlight, and thank you to Nancy Truber. Thank you so much.
Caroline, you're next.
I am going to speak. Hi. Hi, everyone. I'm speaking to you from Sheepshead Bay, from Wildberry Bakery in Sheepshead Bay. And I want you to hear my story. My name is Caroline, and I'm going to be speaking about my father, who's a baker, and the loss that I regret so much in my life that I am going to speak about him right now. Once upon a time, there was a little girl named Caroline who lived in Flatbush, Brooklyn. Her father was a baker. He came to Brooklyn from Budapest at age 14. My hero, my disciplinarian, my father. My father was a Holocaust survivor, and he struggled so much in his life. He attended the Wilton School of Cake Decorating, and I attended the classes with him. He loved to cook, to bake, and he loved the American dream of working hard, earning the American dollar, making your dreams a reality. Yes, Dad, you raised me up. Caroline loved to go visit her father at Ebinger's Bakery. As I stand in front of Ebinger Industrial Factory, which is now condos, I can feel myself as a girl standing outside the baking factory, waiting for my father to come out, waving his spatula towards me, holding a glob of chocolate cake mix in his hand with the vanilla frosting, drooling all over the apron. I can feel the vibrations of myself as a little girl wanting to taste the sugary, weight-inducing ingredients. I have a big smile on my face, and I cannot resist the temptation of sugar. After Caroline's dad passed on, these memories lingered like a bakery fresh aroma. I sometimes wonder what the spatula represents, and in my life, I feel the ghost swimming around the inner circle of my deepest regret of losing my dad. But my feelings are of loneliness, indefinite love, along with great indentations of happiness and excited taste buds. The tears in my eyes are wiped with his gentle apron as chocolate fudge drips from the apron strings. I love his spatula. The spatula is a symbol of love, smiles, and infinite taste of pure cane sugar. My love leans towards cake and fresh baked bread. I love the aroma of fresh bread. Caroline remembered in a dream state. Rye bread. First the dough, then emerging with its crust. It was unbelievably soft and gooey. Bread was baked to the fullest. I loved the dough kneaded with yeast, flour, and water, all mixed together to create a rye loaf. I can feel the bakers on the assembly line, confectionery whizzes, crossing paths filled with the thoughts of creating a happy glob of sweet. The yeast was so tasty, especially with the onion and subtle feelings. To create bread, you must be a master of creation. My dad created a full line of delicacies: bread, cake, apple pies, and turnovers. The turnovers were filled with cooked apples, real sugar, agave, and honey, all stirred in a pot of churned apples. My dad created unique cakes and breads, and he created me too. The years passed, and over the time, the little girl Caroline grew up. Today I bake and cook. It's a symbol of love and sweet sugary smiles. First, chocolate cake with sugar, flour, buttercream, a pan smeared with Crisco, and of course a spatula. You can mix it all together and bake it for 20 minutes, and voila, a beautiful cake is created. It is the dessert of love, sugar, and a little girl like Cinderella in glass slippers, or Alice in Wonderland. I'm Alice, and the kitchen is my Wonderland, filled with all the ingredients to make us both a smile and infinite tears of silence. One day, a terrible illness spread across Brooklyn and all the lands beyond. The people had to stay home and wear masks that covered their mouths and noses. Everyone had time to think about their childhood. As I strolled down Atlantic Avenue and past the old Ebingers, a few tears in my eyes, but now I can see myself as a proud daughter standing outside the bakery with a mask and not a spatula. Peekaboo, I see you, Daddy, please. I am imagining the taste and satisfaction of fresh rye bread, fresh apple strudel, and especially the dark chocolate black forest cake of Ebingers. But wait one moment, I have to take my mask off to satisfy the hunger. Peekaboo, I see you. Stand 6 feet apart. Stand 6 feet apart. Very different way of life. Let's wave to each other, Daddy, with the mask and pretend that you are holding the spatula. I can smell the fresh bread in front of me, waiting to absorb my hunger for sweet delicacies, touching my hungry palate. Papa, peekaboo, are you hiding behind the mask? Please, Daddy, keep your distance. Stand 6 feet away. We must have social distancing. Peekaboo, I see you in this magical world we call reality. I will bake a cake filled with all the ingredients. Chocolate or apples cooked to perfection, stirred frequently to create a glob of filling for the apple strudel. Also flour, maybe raisins, but wait, one more ingredient that we forgot. Let's take our masks off and have taste of this lovely apple strudel that we created. Or how about this idea? Let's throw away our mask forever and satisfy our craving for baking this delicious cakes, pastries, breads, and cookies, all baked with the main ingredient called love. Life is like a box of chocolate. Never know what you will get. I don't know if my father liked me, but I know he loved me. Thank you, everyone, for participating, and thank you, Professor Mutnick, for giving me this chance, and thank all of the Greenlight Bookstore, and thank you for all the editors, the photographers. Thank you very much for listening to this story, and thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jean Barron, and I'm reading three very short essays called Memories of Hunger. And as I want to thank all the participants, people have been very generous in their thank yous, but Voices of Lefferts has been really special to me, particularly for my fellow readers. I want to thank all of you. I've had just an astonishingly beautiful experience participating in this project. So the first essay is from Winter, 1995. I'm sitting in an overheated, carpeted kitchen somewhere in New Jersey, looking down at a plate of food I cannot eat. I see soggy green beans and a pale mystery sauce over squishy lasagna noodles. This is the house of my lover's brother, Tom, who is dying of a cancer that everyone says came from a chemical exposure during his time in Iraq. Tom, who is not yet 40, is not here. His wife, their kids, and her uncles call this place home. Elise, my girlfriend, drove down in a desperate need to help, and I am here to support her. I don't want anyone to know that I cannot imagine swallowing this food. Every day, I watch the kids drink high C and munch on doodles and Oreos. I watch the amiable uncles come home from the shopping and smoke while they cook. In the morning, they have Coors for breakfast. The TV streams pornography with the sound off all day in the living room, where plastic toys clutter the floor. Elise lands in this spot for hours every day to play with the children who crawl over her continuously, hungry for interaction. Tom is in the hospital after an amputation from which he will not recover. And I watch the porn and the children and the thin, constant smile straining on the face of Tom's wife. And I think, how can I sit and arrange my face so that I am adding love into this space? And I think about the route to the Wawa and wonder if they sell bananas. Fall 2007. At Han Asian Kitchen, a Chinese restaurant on Philly's main line, my partner's mother, Anna, has just changed what I understand about how to live with a spoonful of Chinese pepper steak. She's offering me a taste brimming with sauce, but I am struck by the look of confusion on her face as she registers that I have inexplicably shook my head and said, "No, thank you, I don't want a bite." I don't like Chinese pepper steak. I see her freeze. For months, I have been staying with Anna during the week, taking comfort in our nightly TV shows about housewives as I leave my 8-year-old with his father Tuesday through Friday and commute 4 states away to an important new job. Sometimes I miss my son so much that I sob into the phone on my way to airports or trains or buses as my partner listens. One weekend at home, my boy follows me into the bathroom to ask how much longer I'm going to do this. Here at Han Asian Kitchen, I see a look of sadness pass through Anna's eyes as she puts down her spoon. It's the look I would have if I opened my door to the morning and found there a songbird dead on the stoop. This is a revelation. A spoonful of Anna's dinner is not meant to answer my hunger calls. As a young woman in college, I read a book on eating and health, and it issued this dictum: only eat when you're hungry, only eat what you hunger for, and stop eating as soon as you don't want the next bite. I inscribed this guidance into my book of life, what to do and not do among the complicated choices of adulthood. Ever since, I have approached every moment of hunger with a question: what do I crave most? I know for certain that the answer is not Chinese pepper steak. I am not sure what I want to eat from this menu, but I can feel my brain lighting up with clarity. I said to Anna, yes, actually, please, I would like to try it. I would like a bite. Winter 2010. Banu Isa, drank too much on the job. He was a reporter at the only news organizations that everyone trusted in the warlord-torn Central African Republic. He was my guide to politics in the CAR, the subject of my reporting, and I trusted him most of the time as I followed him around the capital, Bangui. The videographer I worked with and I would find ourselves with Issa at beer parks, ordering bottles of local brew and eating heavily spiced grilled meat and something like crunchy yellow corn nuts in between dramatic press briefings over stalled ballot counting. At the press briefings, Issa would point fingers and demand answers, as the other journalists from less independent news outfits looked on in silence. At the beer parks, Issa would tell us how beer sharpened his thinking before writing the day's news. He kept a bag of peanuts and raisins in his pocket. He seemed satisfied and satiated, but I was always hungry during my time in the CAR. Because I was a white woman in the Central African Republic, I was told never to walk the streets alone. I ate a lot of Cliff Bars stashed in the pockets of my suitcase. But if I craved variety, I could ask the videographer or the translator I work with to take me to the corner, or I could buy baguettes, a holdover from French colonial times, smeared with avocado. I could order fried eggs at the hotel. In my last night in the CIR, I told Issa that we should shoot some footage at his house. Would he have us to dinner? We sat around the table in his front yard as he cradled his youngest, a squirmy toddler. We ate roasted vegetables, cassava and broccoli. Roasted meat appeared, gamey and chewy. And Issa told me that they could come for him anytime. He could disappear in the night and no one would know even where his body would be. But telling the truth, he said, made him feel free. And he swallowed the last bite on his plate. Thanks, everybody.
Hello, everyone. I'm Norma Williams, and I will be reading an excerpt from my essay, A Last Taste of the Island. I'm standing in line at a cafe in the Norman International Airport in Jamaica, waiting to order breakfast. Miss, you're next. Great. Give me ackee and codfish, banana and a fried dumpling. You mean ackee and saltfish? Yes, that. This young lady has somehow reminded me of how Americanized I have become, asking for ackee and codfish. Being away from the island has certainly changed certain things for me. It was an early morning flight from Norman Manley International Airport in Kingston, Jamaica, to Kennedy Airport in New York. I had to leave my district in Manchester at 4 a.m. before the cock crow, as they say in Jamaica, to make it to the airport in time for a 9 a.m. flight. When you live in the country areas, it is a long ride to the airport. And as my children would say, everywhere in Jamaica far. That last taste of island food kept calling to me as I waited to board the Iron Bird, the plane. I knew that no Jamaican food would be served on the plane, and that, along with being hungry, had led me to the cafe selling Jamaican food. I ignored other shops that served continental breakfast. I did not want bagels and donuts. I wanted something Jamaican, a last taste of the island to suffice me on the trip to New York. I really did not have to have the ackee and saltfish, but I was hungry, so why not settle for something I love? I had had several such dishes in my 2-week stay at home, and this dish I could prepare for myself or buy in any of the restaurants in Brooklyn that featured such cuisine. I could easily go to Cali, my husband's cousin, and buy a breakfast. His ackee and codfish is pretty good. But what if the store is closed when I want my ackee and saltfish? No problem, man, as we would say in Jamaica. I am a Jamaican, and I know how to make a mean dish of ackee and saltfish. It is almost a Sunday morning staple in my New York home, even though my youngest daughter does not eat ackee. She settles for just saltfish and a choice of bami, which is a flatbread made from grated cassava, fried plantain and fried dumpling, a baked dough made from flour, baking powder, salt, and either milk or water, or a slice of breadfruit, which is a spherical green fruit with an intricate pattern on the skin. Breadfruit is a starchy fruit which can be eaten cooked, roasted, or fried. It is often used in soup preparations and as a substitute for bread. In Jamaica, the breadfruit is most times roasted on an open fire, but my good friend, Mr. Murray, roasts it in the oven, and he is the one who supplies me with roasted breadfruit if I do not get it straight out of Jamaica. So what is so endearing about ackee and saltfish, codfish, which is celebrated as Jamaica's national dish? What makes it a dish that so many love? This love for ackee and saltfish is said to have historical roots. It is part of being Jamaican, although I know a few Jamaicans who do not eat ackee, but that is not the norm. This national dish is loved by many who are not Jamaicans. Most times when I make ackee and saltfish, I share it with my Trinidadian friend. And my brother's children, whose mothers are from Grenada, are also quite happy eating their share of the dish. Ackee and saltfish is the meeting of two continents, Africa and Europe, and of two groups of people, Africans and the British. According to Wikipedia, the ackee seed is said to have been brought to Jamaica in 1778 by a captain on a slave ship coming from West Africa. Its name is derived from ackee fufu. The saltfish was originally codfish. This fish was salted, hence the name codfish. It was supposedly brought from England to feed the enslaved people. I think the ingenuity of the ancestors created this great dish, ackee and saltfish, ackee and codfish. Ackee is memorialized in traditional songs. Carmi Ackee Go Linstead Market is one such song. To hear the rest of my essay, you will need to read it. I just want to thank Voices of Lefferts for this opportunity to share, and of course, my coach, Deborah Mutnick, who is always encouraging us to write, and to all the participants and to all my fellow readers. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Jennifer Chen, and I'm very honored to be a contributor to this issue. Can everyone see me? Okay, thank you. My essay is titled Coming to the Table, and it's about connecting with our community and culture through practices around food. Right before the excerpt I'm reading tonight, I talk about baking for neighbors during the pandemic, which I think is something a lot of us did. Coming to the table. The greatest yield of this enthusiastic baking was the friendships. As I delivered the goods to grateful hands, we would chat on the spot and continue the conversation at much greater length by phone, usually while Luca napped and I strolled in some garden far afield, indoor venue still unavailable or inadvisable. The gift of food nurtured an intimate connection as it had for our parents in our youth. It represented the promise that we were present for one another, and as an expression of love and personal investment, it created an opening. When I hadn't been in touch for a week, Maxine Baxter, matriarch of a 3-generation household across the street, rang up. "We haven't talked in a while. How are you doing?" And we spoke for the better part of an hour, I offering requested advice on calcium supplements, Maxine trading stories of the families she had encountered during her 30-year career at the Brooklyn Children's Museum. Ed Cornelius, who, like Maxine and her family, enjoyed my sourdough focaccia, shared stories of Uncle Victor's immigration from St. Croix to Copenhagen, and his own experiences traveling with the US Navy to Paris, performing in jazz clubs, and meeting his wife, Annette, while they were music and art teachers at PS 154 in Harlem. Ed and Annette moved to our block in Brooklyn from Queens in 1976, around the same time as Tom, the Baxters, and Helen Wells, who was a practicing Black woman attorney, all too rare even today. I wondered aloud about the social evolution they'd each witnessed over the decades. In the context of the then ongoing trial for the murder of George Floyd, Ed said, "There hasn't been a lot of change, but there has been some. One doesn't want to dwell on this side of life too long. George Floyd wasn't the only one, and he won't be the last one, unfortunately. We all know that." Ed paused. I was on the phone with him in my kitchen, fingers tapping on the laptop, not wanting to lose his reflections or his voice. "The best thing you can do is treat people the way you'd like to be treated and raise your son the best way you know how," he said. "We know how we feel, and that's what's important." He recalled the words of the town undertaker during his adolescence in Bay Shore, Long Island. "Remember, Eddie, you aren't better than anyone. You're just better off." A few months earlier, when a spate of brazen anti-Asian hate crimes hit local and national news, Ed left me a touching voicemail, closing with the caution, "And don't let anybody know about your Taiwanese background. There are a lot of crazy folks out there. Take care." The next time we connected in person, we shared a laugh about the advice. I had crossed the street to deliver pumpkin walnut muffins, a favorite of Annette's. "You know, Ed, it's kind of hard to hide the fact that I'm Asian," I said. "Oh, I don't think you look Asian at all," he persisted. He had told me about his failing eyesight and a relinquishment of reading, but until this moment, I hadn't realized how he saw me. "Well then, Ed, don't let anybody know about your being Black and all. There are a lot of crazy folks out there." We both took a breath, then laughed. Ed died on September 21st, 2021. He had some health issues, but we were all nonetheless surprised and, of course, heartbroken. On his 93rd birthday, several months earlier on March 15th, I had delivered slices of chocolate birthday cake and a construction paper card of circumscribed red and blue hearts that Luca and I had made for him. This was the first time in 12 months that I'd been in the home of anyone besides my mother. In a beautifully ironic turn, a virus that sought to decimate us and keep us out of each other's close circles, drew some of us more deeply in. With our defenses and inhibitions relaxed, we found shared sympathies. Thank you. It's been an honor to be part of this project, and thank you for your support of this community history.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Thorne. I'm a self-taught artist, and I'm really proud to have my drawings published in this issue of Voices of Lefferts. I started drawing the neighborhood about 5 years ago. Actually, I started for the first ever issue of Voices of Lefferts. So I'm pleased today to be kind of coming full circle and publishing in this most recent issue again. And I was glad to have the chance to write a little bit about these drawings and where they come from. I'll be reading my artist statement. I started drawing as a way to hide. I was in the 3rd grade and badly socially anxious, with a blushing habit that made the idea of mandatory participation in our class talent show an utter horror. When I begged my teacher for an exemption, she told me I could make an artwork and hold it in front of my face for my entire 2-minute time slot. So I taught myself how to draw. In a way, starting to draw the buildings of Flatbush came from a similar tension of wanting to be both seen and unseen. I was new to the neighborhood, new to the United States, new to political consciousness, and new to adulthood, and suddenly painfully aware of my position as one of the first young white residents of a street in a neighborhood that I knew nothing about. I was desperate for a way to connect to this place, but I wanted also to stay invisible, to find a vantage point from where I could observe without being witnessed. Over time, my anxieties did lessen, and a more nuanced understanding grew as I built real relationships and deepened my engagement with the neighborhood. I kept drawing, and in a funny way, the drawings turned from something to hide behind into my primary avenue of connection with the neighborhood. After spending 20 hours inking the individual bricks of a building, passing by those known shapes on the street felt like an act of intimacy. The neighborhood became familiar, then familial. I grew into ways of listening that were active and present, and ways of looking that were reciprocal. I think of these drawings now as an act of love. They are documentary drawings. My goal is to accurately reflect the complexity and richness of our neighborhood. This kind of bearing witness requires a deep slowness. The drawing is the byproduct of taking the time to really look and to consider the innumerable decisions and accidents that collide to make a place. When you slip into that way of looking, there is meaning in the crooked awnings and errant extension cords that make up the visual textures of our daily lives. Those unimportant details anchor us. The local businesses pictured here nourish our community with food and with cultural connection. As we witness in every series of Voices of Lefferts writing workshops, they form the backdrop for our neighborhood stories and our collective history. As such, it's easy to let them fade into background texture, to glaze over their role in our routines, picking up groceries, grabbing a quick lunch. I invite you to take a moment to look at them instead as monuments. Although I've only been drawing the neighborhood for a few years, some of the drawings already serve a memorial function. Nothing is permanent for better or for worse, but I hope there is power in planting the stake in the ground, of creating something that says simply, this was here and this is how it was. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rena Klieg, and I'll be reading to you from my essay called If Music Be the Food of Flatbush, Play On. I mentioned an organization which the name isn't actually in this excerpt, it's PLG Arts. So I moved to PLG after living for 30 years in a loft apartment building in the Flatiron district of Manhattan. We were pioneers there, moving into an industrial area years before restaurants and residents filled the neighborhood. The streets were dark and deserted after the factory workers left at 4 p.m., except for the occasional sighting of Andy Warhol, who had the second incarnation of the factory, his art studio, nearby. Interesting characters lived in each of the 18 apartments in our building, and we all became like a family. One, a choreographer, taught me not to throw out the stem ends of zucchinis because they make a great soup stock. A jazz photographer slash painter slash drummer who stored his drum kit in my apartment would come up from his place on the 5th floor to practice in my place on the 8th. One of the concerts we hosted was a new music piece that featured a performer pouring applesauce from a jar onto a plate. In this confluence of food and music, we were asked to notice the sound it made as it landed. When I moved to PLG, I was looking for another family. A poster on a lamppost advertised a group that was forming to work in the arts. I'm a part-time musician, so I responded. We met at the Maple Street School, sitting in a circle on chairs designed for 3-year-olds, discussing projects that could be produced for very little money. We now sit on full-size chairs in backyards or living rooms, or lately in our own homes as we Zoom together. But we still discuss art projects that can be produced for very little money. A feeling of community comes from working jointly to figure out how to bring people together safely in this time of COVID. The sense of community I feel in PLG has grown throughout the years. It's related to food, music, and friendship. For example, I meet at least 2 or 3 people I know as I walk to the community garden on Maple Street every Saturday to pick up paper bags filled with fresh fruits and vegetables. We stand and chat, move on, meet the next person, chat. At the garden, I'm greeted by name by the people who hand me my weekly food bag. The food I buy there brings us together. The commonality of food prevails. On many weekends these days, a few friends meet in COVID pods, sitting 6 feet apart and eating single-serve snacks. After all, what's a gathering without snacks? Food is essential. Food is the glue that holds us together. We spend more time talking about viruses, vaccines, and disease transmissibility than we ever devoted to other topics. If these weren't matters of life and death, it would be boring. Wait, it is boring, even though they are life and death matters. Can't we please discuss something else? Let's talk about food then. Food is life, and for me, so is music. Food is the glue and the lubricant. We force ourselves to think about the future, to remember that art lasts forever, that we must eat every day, and that how and what we eat matters. What we do with food, how we choose it, buy it, use it, those are the choices we can make, that we can control. To paraphrase the bard, if music be the food of Flatbush, play on. Thank you all.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Andrea Phillips Merriman, and my story is called Millicent and Shefish Heads. I started off writing this story as a silly little story. And then as I progressed, I realized that it had a lot to do with grief. It had a lot to do with a lot of environmental issues and food shortage. So Here's my story. I'll just read excerpts. Cooking fish heads is common in many cultures. Place, imagination, and context impose nuances on the meal. Fish heads in Russia are enhanced with a dash of vodka. In some parts of India with curry and tamarind. In the Philippines, coconut milk. In China, the flavor of lemongrass or bean curd. In Japan, teriyaki sauce. And in parts of Africa, palm oil and coconut water. The Caribbean, diaspora within diaspora, mix up within mix up, fusion upon fusion, hybrid upon hybrid, pepper pot and cook up. They revel in their panorama of choices, flavors, and textures, but confident in their ways to make food sweet. Eating fish head had long gone beyond the satisfaction of hunger for Millicent. From her mother, it was a wordless transmission of pleasure and knowing that she had the power to create something special out of something that did not seem so special. With her imagination, Millicent brought her mother back every time she cooked. With the mortar, she pounded in syncopation with women on islands and continents, pounding plantains and yams and creating stews and soups with okra and cassava and eddo leaves. Each ingredient telling a story of resilience, displacement, and belonging. In New York, Millicent created a fish head map with multiple locations culled from her Google Maps timeline, where fish heads are available, where they're fresh, where they're free, where they're cheap or reasonably priced, and where they're convenient, in that order of priority. Her smartphone held her fish buying history, name of fish store, picture, address, date, number of occasions visited, and not to mention the enticement to write online a review of her experience in the store. Eating fish heads. She's careful with the tiny bones. First, she eats the collar, sort of like flaps at the bottom of the head, then the cheeks, all loaded with solid flesh that soak up the flavor of the garlic and the ginger and the thyme. By the nose part of the fish is something like a kind of soft gristle or cartilage. It's crunchy, chewy. She loves that. That hard skull part of the head, Millicent always sucks that and chews it up till it's husk dry. The part of the fish head Millicent always leaves for the last are the eyes. Yes, the eyes. With the fork, Millicent digs out the eye part out of the socket, then slurps the gooey stuff around the eyeball, the vitreous humor, they call it. She only cares that it's nice, but weird on her tongue. The eyeball of a fish is hard and black, like a bead. She bites that till the black comes off, leaving it white and misshapen. She spits it out. Then she eats the chunks that fall from the head in the plate and slurps up the juice. She licks her finger, sweet. There's a way not to eat a fish head. Girl, Millicent, I hear that them fishermen just dump the fish heads in the oceans after they catch the fish. What a blasted waste. They should call me. I was listening to this lady talk about how they even dump head and tail and skin and bones and scales in landfills and have the place smell and stink. Millicent, imagine if you live in there to that, Jocelyn says. But how that making sense to them? Like they've been to school on the back step. My mother used to say, common sense better than book sense. Look how much meat does be on the fish head. All them people that don't have food to eat. Maybe they don't think fish head is food, and good food at that. You mean somebody that hungry won't be glad for a nice bowl of hot fish soup with some dumplings and plantains and green bananas? They need to do something about that. I serious. Millicent girl, I guess it left up to me and to you to save this part of the planet we on. I didn't think about saving the planet when I was eating fish head, but girl, you're right. You're right. You're absolutely right. You're damn right. Yes, we need more fish heads on we plate. Fish heads, roly-poly fish heads, fish heads, eat them up, yum. That's from a song called Fish Heads, a 1978 song. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Rena and Laura and Jen and Norma and Caroline and Jean and Robert. What an amazing reading. I wish we could hear everybody's applause, but here's mine. Just terrific. Everybody, if you want to turn your cameras on, we don't have a lot of time for a Q&A. And, you know, we found that with these webinars, there's a witching hour. It's after 60 minutes and people start to leave. And so we don't want to keep you for too long. We have one question in the Q&A from Brenda Edwards. Others, please put your questions in the Q&A. We'll take a couple at least, maybe 2 or 3. Brenda asks, this I think is to everybody, what do you feel was the biggest challenge in creating your work? So does somebody want to take that, start us off? Robert, can you start us off? What do you think what's the biggest challenge in creating your work?
I think the biggest challenge for me was, you know, really being true to the subject and also just taking the time to be consistent. I really like the idea about writing about food and how the historical narrative and the political narrative and the social narrative draws community, and this is just such an ever-evolving genre of writing.
Thank you. Anybody else want to take a stab at that? Jennifer? Or who's? Caroline. You're muted, Caroline.
Now I'm okay?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I loved everybody's story, and thank you very much for participating and listening, and I enjoyed listening to everybody else. I think it's a great part that what really drove us to write was just able to think about life and to think how happy and how appreciate that we are living throughout the pandemic and that we survived COVID. And it was such an emotional time, and we didn't really know what to do. So we just kind of sat and thinking about how we appreciate waking up in the morning and listening to music, having a cup of coffee. And I want to appreciate, you know, just living and the gift of life and just to be here.
Thank you, Caroline. And was Jean, were you going to say something? Did I?
I was going to quickly just say, for me, being able to think in a very short form, giving myself permission to stay very short was important.
And you did. To great effect. Those are wonderful, very short prose poems almost, right?
Yes, Jean's.
So, Norma, go ahead.
For me, the challenge was just keeping the relative or relevant details, not going all over the place. That was one of my challenges in writing this story, which I began in the airport in Jamaica, and just wanting to somehow do a full circle. And so I ended my essay with a hope of returning and ordering it the correct way and not codfish, but saltfish. So that was a challenge, just putting the pieces together. People who I know who deal with ackee and saltfish, ackee and codfish, putting in my family into this story and other people. So that was the challenge, to give them homage.
Thank you. Maybe one, if anybody else on the panel wants to answer that question, and then we can wrap it up. There's two other questions in the Q&A, but they're technical questions, so I will answer those. But does anybody else want to speak to the challenges of writing your work for this issue, or more generally?
Jean shows mastery of a short form, and I show sort of approach to a long form. As Deb and Rena, my editor, know, my piece was edging on the side of too long, but the challenge for me was interweaving the threads and bringing in my personal story of where I come from in order to reflect more deeply on who I am here and who my neighbors are and how I'm getting to know this community and to be an active member of this community. So, and I did some research with neighbors to hear more stories and to deepen my understanding of their stories. And that was challenging in its own way, but a huge pleasure and a gift. So thanks for the question, Brenda.
Thank you, Jen. So there is a question from Leslie Martinez, and Laura, I'm going to ask you to answer this because maybe you can say a little bit more than yes or no. Leslie asks, are the drawings for sale?
Yes, is the short answer. You can see I sell prints of the drawings. You can see them all at plgprintsale.com, which I can put in the chat. And I also am always working on custom drawings too. So folks can get in touch through the website if that's of interest.
Thank you. And I think Jean Yoon, our host tonight, answered Leslie's other question, which is, is this issue still available at Greenlight? And yes, it is. Please go out and buy it. And if you buy all of the issues that are there, we often sell out. We will supply the bookstore with another batch of them. So, but get it soon because they do sell out. So I think on that note, since there aren't any other questions in the Q&A, let me thank everybody who attended tonight's program. We're so happy that you joined us tonight. We hope you'll join us for events in the future. We hope that we'll be back in person the next time we give a reading. We really miss that, especially tonight, because it made everybody so hungry. You know, it would have been nice to have a little food to give you, but it'd have to be virtual. Thank you to the readers, the authors, our artist who is featured in this issue. You are all so amazing. It's such a pleasure to hear you read your work. Thank you to Jean for hosting us. Thank you to Greenlight as always. And we hope we see you next time.
Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah, for
Thank
making
you.
it happen.
Thank you.